Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about something many don't want to admit, but need to hear. Stop being nice. To men, do this instead. Be clear, be grounded, and be aligned with your core values. Niceness is often mistaken for kindness, but there's a critical difference. Kindness comes from strength. Niceness often comes from fear of being disliked, abandoned, or misunderstood. When you're overly nice, you suppress your needs, lower your standards, and teach men that unclear boundaries are acceptable. This doesn't build respect. It builds resentment on both sides. So what should you do instead? Train your nervous system to tolerate discomfort. That means say what you mean, even if your voice shakes. Hold your ground even when someone pushes back. Assert your standards not to control, but to signal self-respect. This isn't about being harsh. It's about being real, about regulating your own biology so you're not operating from anxiety or guilt. Stop managing other people's feelings. Start managing your own boundaries, because men don't respond to niceness. They respond to clarity, certainty, and calm conviction. What creates true connection isn't compliance. It's authenticity. It's presence. It's emotional precision. You don't need to be nice to be loved. You need to be you, regulated, expressed, and unapologetically self-respecting. Clarity activates respect because it eliminates ambiguity at the level of both perception and neurobiology. When you're clear, whether in your communication, your body language, or your emotional signals, you send a coherent message that the brain can process with certainty. The human brain is designed to detect threats and predict outcomes. Ambiguity triggers uncertainty, which the nervous system often interprets as danger or instability. When you're unclear, others, especially men, are left guessing, and guessing creates tension, not connection. On a physiological level, clarity stabilizes the interaction. It regulates the autonomic nervous system. When someone knows where you stand, their brain no longer needs to stay in a heightened state of alertness. Cortisol levels can drop, and the prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and trust evaluation, can engage more fully. This opens the door for mutual respect to form. Respect isn't built on how agreeable you are. It's built on how trustworthy and predictable you are. When your words align with your actions and your boundaries are communicated with precision, people feel safer around you. They understand you're not operating from emotional volatility, but from intentionality. That creates weight behind your presence. Not force, just solidity. And that solidity is what earns respect. Emotional regulation is not just a soft skill. It's a biological foundation for effective communication, decision-making, and connection. When we talk about emotional regulation, we're referring to the brain and body's ability to maintain internal stability in the face of external pressure. This isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about integrating it. It's the difference between reacting impulsively from a stress state and responding deliberately from a grounded one. Every interaction you have is governed by the state of your nervous system. Whether you're in a job interview, a relationship conflict, or setting a boundary, your physiology is either working for you or against you. If you're dysregulated, meaning your heart rate is elevated, your breath is shallow, your pupils are dilated, and your prefrontal cortex is partially offline, your system is in survival mode. That state diminishes your capacity to perceive nuance, process complexity, or stay attuned to another person. You may still be able to perform socially, say the right things, smile at the right times, but the signal you're sending out isn't congruent, and the human brain is highly attuned to that kind of incongruence. When someone is in your presence, their nervous system is constantly scanning for cues of safety or danger. This process is automatic. It's not conscious, and it doesn't care about your intentions. It only cares about the signals your body is giving off. So you can be trying to impress, trying to please, trying to seem agreeable or smart, but if your body is tense, your gaze is scattered, or your tone is flat, it doesn't land. People may not know why, but they'll feel unsettled. That's the paradox of performance. It's often more about presentation than embodiment. But the body doesn't lie. Regulation is the difference between communicating and truly being heard. This is why emotional regulation always trumps performance. Performance can be rehearsed. It can be mimicked. But regulation is real time. It's embodied. When your internal state is calm and coherent, you project clarity without effort. Your tone carries weight, your timing improves, and your message becomes neurologically easier for others to process. You appear trustworthy even before you say a word. That's not charisma, it's biology. Regulation gives you access to choice. Without it, you're in survival reflexes, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. You're not leading the interaction. You're being led by your body's attempt to stay safe. But when you're regulated, your breath is full, your awareness is wide, and your cognitive functions, especially in the prefrontal cortex, are available. That's where strategic thinking, empathy, and insight come from. And that's what people respond to. So instead of trying to perform confidence, train the system that produces it. Instead of rehearsing how to sound nice, learn to stay grounded when someone disapproves of you. Practice being in discomfort without scrambling to fix it, because that discomfort tolerance, that regulation, is what makes your boundaries real, your presence felt, and your message trustworthy. You don't need to be more polished, you need to be more present. And presence doesn't come from what you say, it comes from the internal conditions you cultivate. Regulate first, then speak, then act, because when your biology is aligned, you don't have to convince anyone of anything. You just become undeniable. Niceness, particularly the compulsive automatic kind, is often misunderstood. It's praised socially, rewarded interpersonally, and mistaken for kindness or maturity. But beneath the surface, it's frequently a patterned response developed in early environments where safety, acceptance, or love were contingent upon compliance. In many cases, this kind of niceness isn't a virtue. It's a survival strategy. A learned behavior shaped not by free choice, but by nervous system adaptations to relational stress or threat. When a child grows up in an environment where emotional expression leads to rejection, anger, withdrawal, or chaos, the brain quickly begins to recalibrate. The developing nervous system starts prioritizing behaviors that minimize the chance of conflict. That means appeasing, staying quiet, suppressing needs, mirroring others' emotions, and avoiding confrontation at all costs. This is not a conscious strategy, it's a neurobiological one. The system is scanning for patterns and encoding responses that will keep the organism safe. Niceness, in that context, is not generosity, it's vigilance. Over time, these patterns get embedded. The amygdala, which plays a central role in detecting threat, becomes hypersensitive to cues of disapproval. The insular cortex, involved in social pain, may become more reactive. The vagus nerve, which mediates our sense of social safety and calm, becomes conditioned to associate relational tension with danger. So by adulthood, the person doesn't even think, I need to be nice to avoid rejection. Their body just does it. They smile when they're uncomfortable. They agree when they don't want to. They apologize reflexively. They say yes when their whole system is screaming no. What's crucial to understand is that this isn't just the way someone is. It's not a personality trait, it's a defense mechanism. It's the residue of a nervous system that never got the signal. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to disappoint people. You're allowed to be disliked and still be safe. And until that signal is received and integrated, until the body learns that boundaries are not dangerous, niceness will continue to function as armor. Not protection from others, but protection from the internal discomfort of being real. The problem is, niceness is often externally rewarded. People say you're easy to be around, agreeable, polite, but internally, it creates a dissonance. Needs go unmet. Resentment builds. Relationships feel one-sided, and worst of all, the person doesn't feel seen, not because others are cruel, but because they never allow themselves to be fully visible. Niceness becomes a way of disappearing. From a physiological perspective, constantly managing other people's perceptions is exhausting. It keeps the system in a chronic low-grade stress state. Elevated cortisol, shallow breathing, suppressed affect, poor interoception. Over time, that impacts immune function, emotional resilience, even digestion and sleep. So what seems like a social behavior is actually affecting the entire system. This is why the work of healing isn't about becoming less kind, it's about becoming more authentic. It's about teaching the nervous system that disagreement doesn't equal danger, that boundaries don't lead to abandonment, that emotional honesty won't destroy connection, it strengthens it if the connection is real. And that starts with awareness. You can't interrupt a pattern you can't see. The moment you notice yourself smiling when you're angry, saying yes when you mean no, or softening your words so they don't upset anyone, pause. Not to judge yourself, but to acknowledge this is a pattern born from protection. Then breathe, feel your body, anchor into the present, and ask, what do I really want to say? What would it mean to trust that I'm safe enough to say it? This isn't about swinging to the other extreme, becoming harsh, cold, or aggressive. It's about moving from reflex to choice, from self-abandonment to self-ownership. When niceness is no longer required for safety, something deeper emerges, real kindness. And that doesn't come from fear, it comes from freedom. Assertiveness builds attraction because it signals something fundamental to the human nervous system: stability. And not just behavioral stability, but physiological coherence. When someone is assertive, not aggressive, not passive, but truly assertive, they communicate that they are in control of their internal state. Their thoughts, emotions, and actions are aligned. There's no guessing game. And that level of internal clarity is not only rare, it's incredibly attractive, because it signals safety in the most primal way. To understand this, you have to look at what attraction really is. It's not just chemistry. It's not just looks or charm or clever conversation. It's the brain and body registering, often unconsciously, that someone can handle reality, that they don't flinch from truth, that they can tolerate discomfort, hold boundaries, and still remain open, responsive, and present. Assertiveness tells the other person, "You don't need to manage me. I know where I stand." And when we talk about gravity in relationships, we're talking about energetic weight, the ability to stay rooted when things get tense, the ability to express a truth and not unravel when it's challenged, the ability to hear no and not take it as a threat to your identity. Assertive people project that energy not because they're trying to impress, but because their nervous system is communicating something clear, and I can hold my ground without losing connection. That's powerful, because it allows the other person's system to relax. There's no need to decode signals or manage volatility. There's just presence, directness, clarity. That's why passivity often repels, even when it comes packaged as politeness or niceness. When someone suppresses their needs or opinions, the other person's nervous system senses it. There's an incoherence between what's being said and what's actually felt. You say yes, but your tone says maybe. You smile, but your body is tense. That creates low-grade uncertainty, and uncertainty over time erodes trust. It doesn't matter how agreeable you are. If the signals are misaligned, the connection doesn't feel safe. And if it doesn't feel safe, attraction diminishes, not because of a lack of compatibility, but because of a lack of clarity. Assertiveness restores that clarity. It aligns your inner and outer worlds. When you say no, it means no. When you say yes, it carries weight. That integrity becomes felt, not just heard. It allows the interaction to move from performance to connection. And connection is the bedrock of sustained attraction. Not intensity, not seduction techniques, not performative emotionality. What holds attention long-term is someone who can be fully present without collapsing into people-pleasing or overpowering the space with control. Biologically, assertiveness activates a different system than aggression or submission. It's grounded in the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, the one responsible for rest, recovery, and social bonding. It lowers cortisol, promotes oxytocin release, and stabilizes heart rate variability. All of these signals contribute to a state in the other person that says, "See, and I feel safe with you." And that safety allows desire to build, not as a spike of dopamine-driven novelty, but as a deep, sustained interest rooted in the way someone's presence makes your own system feel regulated and alive. People often chase intensity thinking it's attraction, but intensity without safety is trauma reenactment. It's volatility mistaken for chemistry. Assertiveness, in contrast, creates a container. It's the structure that lets real intimacy unfold. Not just emotional, but physical, intellectual, and energetic. It's what makes the body say, "So I can relax here. I can trust this. I don't have to perform or protect myself." And that's when attraction becomes something sustainable, something that doesn't burn out after the first few encounters, but actually deepens. So if you want to build attraction, stop trying to please. Stop editing yourself. Stop asking how to be liked. Start training your nervous system to hold your truth. Speak it clearly, respectfully, without apology. That's not rudeness. That's emotional maturity. And that maturity is rare. Rare things draw attention, but more than attention, they draw to respect. And respect is the soil where real grounded attraction takes root. Unspoken resentment doesn't just live in your mind, it lives in your body. It affects your tone, your posture, your gaze, your breath. Even if you never say a word, your nervous system broadcasts that resentment in ways that other people feel. And over time, that silent tension begins to erode the very foundation of connection. Not because there's open conflict, but because something fundamental, trust, safety, coherence, begins to deteriorate. When you feel resentment and don't express it, the body holds it. There's a contraction, a tightening, a suppression of energy. You might think you're keeping the peace, but what you're actually doing is storing friction in your system. That friction has nowhere to go, so it leaks out. Through passive-aggressive remarks, through emotional distance, through a withdrawal of presence. You don't mean to pull away, but your body no longer feels safe to stay open. The limbic system, the part of your brain that handles emotion and threat detection, registers the resentment as a danger cue. It shifts into a defensive posture. And once that shift happens, connection stops being fluid. It starts being filtered. The real issue is that unspoken resentment creates misalignment. You're smiling, but your jaw is tight. You're listening, but your eyes are scanning. You're nodding, but inside you're bracing. This mismatch between what you feel and what you express creates confusion in the other person's nervous system. They may not consciously understand what's happening, but their body picks it up. They feel unsettled, less relaxed, less open. And that response makes your resentment grow, because now you're not just holding anger, you're also feeling unseen. That's how the spiral begins. Resentment, unspoken, acts like static in the signal. The relationship may continue on the surface, conversations, shared routines, even moments of closeness. But something becomes distorted. Communication becomes less honest. Affection becomes more mechanical. The connection starts to feel hollow, not because either person is broken, but because neither system feels fully safe. And the brain tracks that disconnection. It builds a memory trace of suppression, withdrawal, and lack of repair. Over time, those traces turn into patterns. Patterns of disengagement, patterns of avoidance, patterns of emotional withholding, not out of cruelty, but out of protection. And protection is often where relationships stall, not because people stop caring, but because they start protecting themselves from the cost of caring too much and not being met. That's what resentment really is. A signal that your care has gone unacknowledged, your effort has gone unreciprocated, or your boundaries have been ignored. And when that signal gets muted instead of addressed, the nervous system adapts. It starts preparing for disappointment. It reduces vulnerability, and without vulnerability, connection turns transactional. From a neurobiological perspective, emotional suppression increases sympathetic arousal. The body starts to carry more tension, breath becomes shallow, digestion slows, sleep quality drops. This isn't just emotional, it's systemic. Resentment activates the same stress pathways as threat. And when the source of that threat is a relationship that's supposed to feel safe, the dissonance becomes even harder to tolerate. That's why people often describe feeling undrained or numb in long-standing relational dynamics where nothing is openly wrong, but nothing feels fully right. What heals resentment isn't confrontation, it's regulation and expression. You have to teach your system that it's safe to name what you're holding, that you won't be abandoned for being real, that your truth doesn't need to be explosive to be heard. And that requires pacing, grounding, choosing the right moment and tone, not to win a fight, but to restore coherence between your internal state and your outward signal, because coherence is what makes you legible. And being legible is what makes real connection possible. When you speak what's true, not from anger but from clarity, you create a new pattern in the relationship. You show the other person and your own nervous system that honesty doesn't destroy intimacy, it deepens it. You reclaim the space between you from static and distortion and begin to rewire it for safety, presence, and trust. So if something's bothering you, speak it. Gently, clearly, not to accuse but to clear the signal. Because every moment you suppress your truth to keep the peace, you're building a silent wall. And every time you choose honesty over hiding, you bring that wall down, brick by brick. Not all at once, but steadily, until the space between you isn't filled with unspoken weight, but with something lighter, something alive, something that feels like real connection. Oxytocin is often celebrated as the neurochemical of connection. The hormone that deepens social bonds, promotes trust, and fosters empathy. It plays a critical role in facilitating prosocial behaviors and nurturing relationships, from parent-child bonding to romantic attachment. When oxytocin is released in the right context, it calms the nervous system and enhances feelings of safety and closeness. However, this same powerful chemical, when engaged without proper boundaries, can paradoxically lead to emotional exhaustion and burnout. At its core, oxytocin reduces the brain's perception of social threat. It dampens the activity of the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, making you more open to vulnerability and receptive to others' emotional states. This creates a feedback loop of connection. The more oxytocin you release in social interactions, the more attuned and caring you become, which then invites even more connection. While this is adaptive in balanced relationships, problems arise when this system is chronically activated without adequate self-regulation. Without boundaries, oxytocin's role in social bonding can become a liability rather than a benefit. This occurs because oxytocin not only increases your empathy and nurturing drive, it also suppresses self-protective mechanisms. You become less sensitive to internal cues of stress and depletion. Instead of noticing when you are overwhelmed or exhausted, your brain's chemistry masks these warning signals, encouraging you to push forward in caregiving or emotional availability beyond sustainable limits. This neurochemical suppression of internal distress can lead to a state where you are overextending emotionally and physically without realizing the toll it's taking. You might find yourself constantly on for others, offering support, absorbing emotional burdens, and sacrificing your own needs. The paradox here is that the very hormone that fosters connection is also facilitating a form of emotional overcommitment that erodes your capacity for self-care. Over time, chronic oxytocin-driven caregiving without boundaries results in heightened cortisol levels, your body's primary stress hormone, which counteracts oxytocin's calming effects. This biochemical tug-of-war taxes your nervous system, causing symptoms like fatigue, irritability, anxiety, and diminished resilience. Your ability to regulate emotions declines because the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive control and emotional regulation, is compromised by prolonged stress.